I'm Carolyn Royston, and I'm Director of Digital at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.
And I'm Megan Richardson. I am Director of the Virtual Museum of Canada within the Canadian Museum of History, where Eric works.
Okay, so thanks again for coming, and we'll get started.
Eric, you might need to bring the mic closer for the recording.
Okay. Oh yeah, and we're recording. Yeah. I keep forgetting about that. So, as I said, the Canadian Museum of History, our organization is the Canadian Museum of History Corporation, which is actually the Canadian Museum of History, which you see on the left, and the Canadian War Museum on the right, and as well we sort of offer the support to Virtual Museums Canada. And we also have one online property, Virtual Museum of New France, which I should mention. Okay, so getting into it, I just want to give a caveat that about transformation, because it can mean many things, and I think personally when people talk about transformation, it seems very sudden and planned, and not quite as slow as it actually takes place, particularly in our organization. If you don't have the advantage of sort of resetting your museum, which some people are lucky enough to have, it's a very slow, incremental process that can sometimes move backwards as well, which isn't comfortable but is necessary. But most importantly, transformation has to come from the top down to be sustainable. I'm not at the top, so that's the topic of my presentation. How do you encourage transformation in your institution when you're not there? And again, I'm going to talk about some dysfunctions in institutions, and I'm going to say this is not about my institution when I'm talking about us institutions being, siloed, bordering on dysfunctional, or a culture of perceived incredible risk when it comes to technology in your organization, or your organization does not consider data a resource yet. That's not my organization. Ours is perfect. So I'll play a little video, and this will set up the project that I'll be referring to later. It's a transformation project going on right now at my organization called Canadian History Hall.
I designed the exhibit halls so that they could be constantly changing, that it be forever opening, changing, just like nature does with the four seasons.
So this was made by our development team. Greatest video, but it's serving a purpose to raise money. Whoops. Notice how much digital is in this video. Pause here for non sequitur. This is our Prime Minister. He'll pop up later, but it's the time of year to think about world leaders, and it's incredibly strange that our development team chose to put a politician in the video, but it just goes to show there's also some transformation happening politically in Canada. And it's actually a very risky move because we're directly under the auspices of Parliament. So anyway, just a note, think of it later. some weird extended display happening here. Stop it.
There you go.
There we go. And come back. There we go. Sorry, 1 second. I had to kind of MacGyver this. There it is. So next I'm going to talk about the bit about Carolyn. As you can see, slide it over here so I can read my notes.
That's my front page.
And that's your slide. Alrighty.
Strange.
And there we go. Thank you.
Wow, that's great.
All right.
Great
This is
slide.
Carolyn here. Thanks for your patience. So Carolyn's the common thread here that you're going to hear in our presentations. In the Canadian History Hall project, we had done all kinds of years of planning, years of consulting and strategizing, and we had capacity and resources, and we contracted Carolyn as a wonderful strategist to come in and help us with a digital experience framework that we're going to inject into History Hall. This is going to have a very elegant and sophisticated digital platform underneath, collecting data, giving a lot of digital touch points to visitors, and we wanted to do the platform correctly and right. We knew at that point this would change us, and we wanted to springboard and make this change us at an enterprise level, affect all museums, not just this exhibition. And we wanted to take that new ecosystem we were making for History Hall and extend it across the corporation to an enterprise level, even getting into CRMs and ticketing, creating sort of maybe 2 databases across 2 museums. That didn't happen. So Carolyn came in, and we had a prophetic experience with her. And you'll see in this photo, this is Carolyn up here. And this is us sacrificing some of our budget to her. This is our team coming in. And over 3 days, after she accepted the sacrifice, we met with all the institutional stakeholders. We came up with our digital experience framework. Everyone was happy. Consensus was reached. But what mattered really in was the prophecy that the oracle Carolyn had given to us. So you might wonder what that prophecy was. So digital experience framework will become a catalyst for change. Great, kind of obvious. We're planning on moving forward. That's why we brought Carolyn in to really transform and build up this new system. But like any good oracle, it meant something else. It was correct, but it meant something else. It's not what we expected, and it took us about a year to figure that out. So I'm going to go time travel here, or prove that time travel exists. There's Carolyn predicting what would happen a year later, is that this would be, in fact, here's her prophecy, delivering it. It will be a catalyst for change. And in fact, it is. It still is. So, built on this framework that we had crafted a year ago, we planned, designed, budgeted, got excited about a very exciting visitor data and engagement project. I wrote a proposal for it. I was going to present it here at MCN. I was super stoked. It's an exciting visitor data engagement project, the likes before of which had never been seen. No, it didn't happen. So here we are. So why did things go sideways? They do. So was the prophecy wrong? No, it was right. Just in a completely different way. It meant something else. So what do? You create opportunities to transform your institution because it obviously needs to change. We realized we had that mirror held up to us. We could not deliver on what we had anticipated because of the way for a number of reasons, which I won't get into detail. But we're happy to say we're making a lot of progress. So how can we affect change when it comes from the top? And how long does it take? It takes a while. So I'll just get into some of the opportunities that we've now sprung onto, and I'll tell you some of the happy, positive stuff that have come out of this realization that we could not get to the point where we had kind of dreamed about and blue skied. And one of them is that we had this opportunity of a new division that I'd been brought in to be a part of to deliver this project. And we're still part of that IT part of the museum, but we're digital technologies. We're more about being on the exhibition floor and in direct contact with the visitor. Our role we service, we're a support unit, a division, but we needed to change. We needed to become something that was more of a leader in the museum as far as digital experiences. And our division is accountable for the web, mobile, interactives, and AV. Here's the top-down structure of our division. Ken, who reports to the COO, is my boss. There's 4 of us, sort of 3 heads and a head of QA and 2 other PMs. And we have lots of resources. Oops. We have several developers. We bring in contract people when needed. We're really actually lucky that way, and which is I know how incredibly rare that is in the cultural sector. But in part because we had planned such an ambitious project, we had these resources now at our disposal. So, as I said, these are definitely not our barriers, but they may be yours. The organization of a corporation, like ours, very siloed, very disparate, and we need to work on our internal communication. It's a big challenge. Unclear ownership over these technologies, having splintered off from IT, and exhibitions in another division adds another layer of complication. And our new role, where as I said, we want to shift from the support role to the leadership role. So what we do is we talk openly in our division about these barriers. And we don't really point them out, but we come up with solutions, which is really helpful, a positive environment. And we drafted, as a team, a solution to this problem. So we took the document that we created with Carolyn, which was not actionable, and we transformed it into the digital transformation strategy. We flipped it into something we could action at a higher corporate level. And part of the inspiration of it, or I would say inspired from it, the idea of this beautiful statue, which is outside of the museum. So Namak-Sala, this statue is made of copper and pewter. The artist, Marianne Barkhouse, said this was inspired by her grandfather. And he helps, she says it's a true story, he helped a wolf cross a river in a boat in the winter. It was freezing on an island, starving. And it's a crazy thing to do, put a wolf in your boat. Oh, that's starving. But she said he did it, and her grandfather traveled across the water with the wolf in the canoe, and it was happy. And she said her grandfather's stories always offered an alternative view for considering the world around him. And so she says she relates that here, and she talks about being able to negotiate cooperation with an other and inclusion of the wild. So that's kind of how we felt as a division, a danger to the rest of the corporation, an unknown. And we want to work on fixing that, because we're not as bad as a starving wolf, but we kind of feel like it sometimes. So circled here is the bit Carolyn did with us, technology and experience, which we folded in to our strategic planning in much more corporate speak. We talked about agility, mission, governance, business, and we created this document with the COO as the audience. We kept it lightweight, 8 pages. We really took pride in it as a division. And then what did we do with it? Like The Rock, we put it in our front-facing fanny pack. No, that's him wearing a front-facing fanny pack. And we did nothing. So, why? So eventually someone's going to ask you for this document if you work in digital. Someone at the top is going to ask you for a strategy document, a digital strategy document. You'll go on Google and you'll try to download a bunch and you'll try to craft them. It'll take a while and they'll forget and it'll go away and they'll come back. So the plan is to have it ready. And when they ask you, you deliver it right away and you're ready. And that's what happened. So we're lucky. And we made our COO look good. He was happy. Success. So that was a good opportunity for us. And we're still at a stage now where this document is now being validated and brought into the actual corporate policy. So I'm just going to shift over to another really powerful opportunity for us to change our division and change us from that support to leadership role. And that other opportunity is cross-divisional projects. So these are, I think I've probably heard Carolyn speak on this a few times. Being able to do projects outside of your division, even really simple and small ones, bringing people from across your organization in, is really, really powerful. It's not hard to execute, but it's very difficult politically. It takes a lot of time to meet, to build consensus, especially across 2 organizations with a lot of staff. I don't know, we're up 500 people. But it's powerful when you do it. So what we did, this is our old search interface, 17 years old, was still up 2 months ago. Horrible, everyone hated it, the yellow search, that's what people called it. So we took that and we turned it into this. Much nicer, easy to do, hard to get consensus, hard to build, but everyone is so excited and happy about it, right? Very good branding for our division, and turned it into this as well. The other thing we do is a lot of outreach now. And we open our doors, and so we take the opportunity to create space for people to come in. They don't use it, right? Like, no one's going to come into the studio. We have brought people in, but it's the offer and it's the gesture. So we allow people, we're constantly advocating to come in. We'll teach you about technology. We'll bring in vendors that we often get asked to, can we try this software? Can we try this product? So we have a space, and we now have turned into more of a ambassador for technology with open doors in our division. And it gives us the opportunity to do fun projects like my colleague is running next week, which is a hackathon, which is great as well. So we can, now that we have this space, we have this trying to foster this new identity, we can bring in the community, we can bring in programming, education, and do hackathons or prototypes, and start to slowly shift and transform our division to get from that support to leadership role. So that's about it, kind of a non-presentation about something that didn't end up happening. But really at this time of year, and especially on Tuesday, you're gonna have to, one, you're gonna have to have a lot of luck to get a prime minister like this, or sorry, a president for you guys. Because this is our guy now, he's great. But no matter what happens, things will work out in the end. Thank you.
So hi, everybody. For people who've just arrived, again, my name is Megan Richardson, and I'm Director of the Virtual Museum of Canada at the Canadian Museum of History, the same institution that Eric works for. Round about the time that Carolyn was called in as a consultant for Eric's project team on the Canadian History Hall, I joined the Canadian Museum of History and met both Carolyn and Eric. And as Eric mentioned, Carolyn was a consultant, and Eric was focused on the massive project in the museum. I was in charge of transforming a national online program. But despite our differences, we had different responsibilities and different perspectives, the three of us, and probably because of them, we became friends, and that was really the genesis of this presentation this afternoon. So thanks everyone for being here. My presentation is really the story of a journey that started in one place with one set of assumptions and has taken me and my team in unexpected directions with rich, really, and surprising results. For the past year and a half, I've been the director of the Virtual Museum of Canada, which is essentially a federal investment program that supports the development of online products by Canadian museums and heritage organizations. And it's also a website that provides access to these products. The VMC has been around since 2001, when the Canadian government launched it as a portal. It's not a word that we use anymore, but in 2001 it was cutting edge. That led to interactive experiences and resources and also information around Canadian museum collections. This is our very recently, not yet actually up, refreshed splash page, and it's part of a step change towards a much different site. In 2014, the Canadian government decided it was time to take the VMC in a new direction, so the program was transferred to the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec, which is across the river from the Parliament buildings in downtown Ottawa, if any of you have ever been to Canada, or Ottawa. I'm sure you've been to Canada, maybe not Ottawa. A new and smaller team was hired. The core team of the VMC is actually 6 people, and we have support from the larger museum, so that's the VMC team with their colleagues up on the screen, and I was tasked with running the program and leading the change. Bear in mind it's an investment program, so there's money going out annually, but then you're also doing a massive sort of transformation project in these incremental steps. So the VMC has 2 investment streams. The virtual exhibits projects can receive up to $250,000, and here's an example of a recent virtual exhibit, obviously aimed at a family audience. And community stories, which was formerly called community memories projects, receive up to $10,000. The website that we operate features nearly 600 virtual exhibits and related educational resources. And this, as part of the modest refresh that I just referenced, this interface will change as well, but we don't have that loaded yet. So this is a screen grab of the old site. The first step in rethinking the program was establishing the context for the change. You'll all be familiar with some of these steps, but I'll just run you through them quickly. We began with an environmental scan that took a snapshot of the VMC as it was then in 2015. It also identified some research gaps that we could investigate further. It touched on the impact of digital technologies on museums. And it looked at the competitive landscape, which is always important when you're thinking of changing something or repositioning it. You need to know what sort of landscape you're operating in. And we also explored people's expectations of digital, including some best practices and examples of how these expectations are being met. So in our environmental scan, things like the Cleveland Gallery 1 wall came up, and Europeana came up, and many other examples that many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. So at the same time that we were doing the environmental scan, I was having conversations with experts, nationally and internationally, around trends and best practices, challenges and opportunities in digital heritage and culture. And also, of course, about their own experiences managing digital projects. And just a shout out to many of the people represented by the logos on the screen. The generosity of the people in this field is staggering, and the honesty really enriched my work in countless ways and continues to do so. And these were one-on-one Skype calls with people, and the director of the DPLA spoke to me for an hour and a half on a cold call. How great is that, right? So if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, you could completely recreate my project because I have transcripts of every conversation I've had, and it's like a 190-page document, but it's just a great kind of, I guess it's a great piece of evidence of the journey that we took and the process that we implemented. So you'll recognize a lot of these logos, and I'm sure you've heard from some of those people over the last few days. So from the parallel exercises that we were undertaking of research and these conversations, we were able to identify some challenges and opportunities for the VMC around things like usability. There were issues around copyright, the data not being operable between museums, there's no national curriculum in Canada, so the usability of resources that might be developed might be specific to a region or a province. We had also some challenges and opportunities around discoverability. We were constrained by a lack of access through mainstream websites and search engines. Training and sectoral development emerged also as a potential area of difficulty and opportunity. Lack of staff knowledge and skills in developing some of these digital projects that would be funded by the investment program was a theme of many conversations. Infrastructure was limited. Infrastructure was primarily about limited capacity to share learning and best practices across the sector. I have some Canadian colleagues in the room who do incredible work. But we tend to catch up with each other at conferences in the US. So I'm not sure what that says about, museum professionals north of the border. Maybe we're, fewer in number, certainly, and more geographically far-flung. But our exchange tends to happen on this kind of a stage, not so much on our own turf. So maybe that's something we need to work on. The other thing that we looked at, too, was obsolescence. Obviously, the challenge of virtual exhibits becoming outdated as technology changes. Some of the projects on the site have been up for, getting on for 10 years, and they show it. So really what emerged from all of this, there were really 5 big and sticky takeaways that came out of this work. And they were really 5 very simple things. They were really imperatives, though, that I was able to identify from conversations with all these people and the research that we were doing. The first one was know who you serve. And of course, the flip side of that, and we've heard this as a theme through the conference as well, but the flip side of that is know who you don't serve. And be okay with not serving them, potentially. Sometimes this means making tough choices and leaving some user groups behind. So that's an important one to bear in mind when you're looking at changing something that's been around for a while. Know which problems you're solving for your users. And, do they even know that they have those problems? Or do you just think that those are problems that they have and you haven't validated that with them? What's that assumption based on? Know also what the value would be of solving those problems. Is it a hill you want to die on? Is it a challenge you want to take on? Or is it really something that you shouldn't be focusing your energies on? A really important one, which seems ridiculous to say at a conference like MCN, but focus on the user experience, not the technology. I think sometimes I myself, count myself in this category, get distracted by cool new things and shiny objects, and you think, oh, we've got to have that. We've got to be doing that. We'll be bleeding edge because of that. And in fact, it's not the right thing to be doing at all. There's a related assertion that technology changes, but people don't, which I really enjoy and use a lot. And finally, easier said than done, make it beautiful, easy, compelling, and useful. So to be honest, when I took the job and embarked on the work, I really did expect to create some fabulous digital thing that would change the world of Canadian heritage. I wasn't exactly sure what it would look like, but I knew it would be user-centered and technologically cutting edge. But even at this early stage, and this was at this point less than 6 months into the job, the 5 simple imperatives had already started to shift my thinking, and technology started to take very definitely a backseat to the user experience. Over the course of doing this foundational work, a number of models had caught my attention. There was the game virtual museum model. Could we look at the word museum in our title in a new way and turn the website into an immersive space showcasing virtual exhibits with avatars to tour you through thematic galleries of virtual exhibitions? I can still hear Jasper Visser saying on the Skype call, that is totally not the right way to go. That's horrible. And I'm sure I haven't outed him. He would own that comment, I'm sure. We also looked at the idea of, a platform. I won't go into it, but part of the history of the Virtual Museum of Canada program, there was a big part of it that was an aggregator, a content aggregator called Artifacts Canada, but that part didn't transfer with the VMC to us. So could we sort of look at that in a different way and look at models like Europeana and the People's Collection of Wales or the Digital Public Library of America? Could we become the place for teachers to go? Could we really own the teacher side of things and really up the content and the support that we offered them around Canadian heritage and culture? And also, of course, its history as an investment program. Could we reposition ourselves as the go-to for Canadian museums for support around digital? The challenge that we set was to see which of these models or combination of them would be the best fit. This brought us back to the user and led to urgent questions about audience and purpose. I apologize. Oh, no, that's Ryan. So I'm not going to apologize yet. I'm not apologizing about Ryan. So was the VMC primarily a service that was supporting Canadian museums in their digital efforts, or was it a resource or a product, presenting interpreted content and designed experiences for Canadians and other users, or was it both, or some combination thereof? The future of the program and the identification of the model that best fit lay in the answer to this question. As Ryan Dodge, who many of you know, summed up, who is the VMC for? Who does it serve and why? And what is the value of the program? And if you can't answer those questions or start to answer those questions, you really have no business going forward. So those are pretty important ones to nail. So here's what I'm going to apologize for. This slide is in French because I no longer have access to this online survey and just created this slide for a previous presentation in French. So my apologies. But anyway, basically, it's an online Qualaroo survey that we ran on the VMC website for a year to try and better understand people's motivations for visiting the site. And casual browsers and teachers, which are two of the categories listed, you wouldn't be able to read them anyway, were the responses most often selected. The survey became the basis of a Let's Get Real action research project with Culture24. If you're familiar with that, it's a great way to embark on co-learning with your team and to have support through peers who are doing their own projects, but also expert peers who mentor you through the process. Carolyn was one of the people involved in that. So our project in Culture24 was related to the motivational survey on the website, and we used the path analysis and affinity categories, which were kind of coming out in Google Analytics, to validate that the two main groups we thought were using the VMC website were actually using the VMC website. And our analysis suggested it's an art, not a science, doing some of that stuff around affinity categories, but our analysis suggested that 31% of users are casual browsers and less than 3% are teachers. So that leaves a whole whack of other people, 66% or thereabouts, who are neither of those things, but these were the ones that we tested because they were the ones that had emerged most often from the online survey. A related finding to note is that just over half of the survey respondents, so not the Google Analytics analysis of all the users on the site, just over half of the survey respondents said that the site did not meet their needs at all. So that's, pretty important to take that on board. We talked to the people who submitted proposals to our investment program. We did online surveys for each investment stream, and we did debrief phone calls with unsuccessful applicants, which I can seriously recommend. I cannot overstate the importance of doing that, and I made all the calls personally, which was very valuable. It gave me a lot of insight into the challenges people had encountered, the opportunities for us to make change to the program, and their history with the program, and their general sort of opinions about the program. It was very valuable to do that exercise. And it was worth noting here that the number of proposals we received in the second year that we put the calls out tripled from the first year to the second in the smaller program. And in the larger investment program, we experienced an increase of 26%. So those are both really good numbers and suggesting a positive trend. We spoke with members of the wider Canadian museum community at conferences and meetings. I just asked them to write on a piece of paper some advice for the new team of the VMC that I would take back to the gang at home, so they were all too happy to comply. And we rebuilt our email list by calling most of Canada's 2,400 museums. We called them. We hired 2 summer students. We gave them a list. Actually, we didn't give them a list. There is no list. We went on, of all places, Wikipedia and Googled Canadian museums and started with the list of museums by province in Canada, and they adjusted it and adapted it and edited it, frankly, as they went. But many, many, many phone calls were made in the summer of 2015, and that was also extremely productive. It helped us build our list, it helped us make connections, and was in large part responsible for that big jump in proposals that we saw the autumn right after that. Along the way of doing this work, we learned that 63% of Canadian museums have 3 or less employees. 86% have 10 or less. So the vast majority of the museums in Canada are what I would call smalls to medium smalls. And bigs are certainly in the minority. Only 5% of Canadian museums have more than 50 employees. And 82% have operating budgets under $1 million. So just to kind of put in perspective what a $250,000 investment would do if your entire ops budget was less than $1 million, that sort of gives you a bit of an idea there. I also knew from experience as a Canadian and someone who has spent their career working for national museums that the country is vast, it's sparsely populated, and it's loosely networked, and that certainly was borne out by the calls. So moving quickly through the rest of it, I also learned happily that the VMC still matters to most museums and holds a place in the digital cultural landscape in Canada. People really value the financial and human support that we provide, and it's not just the money. It's having someone at the end of the phone that you can call and ask a question of. It's having that person embark on your project with you if you receive an investment and support you throughout the development process right to launch. They value the quality of the content that we showcase. It's their content, but everybody is in agreement that it's quality content that's there. And for smaller museums in particular, the visibility and reach that a VMC project gives them can't be overstated. I also learned that capacity, and I've referenced this before, but it bears repeating, in terms of knowledge and skills and resources, varies widely across Canadian museums, and that while some may be ready to embrace cutting-edge digital projects, and many are, some are still struggling to deliver on their main missions, and others find digital to be two camps, either daunting or simply not a priority for their institution. So those were some of the messages and stories that were coming out of all of that contact that we made. One conversation and piece of research built on another until a direction began to emerge, and much as the game/virtual museum platform and the platform and the teacher center were all interesting models that we'd been thinking about and testing as ideas, they really didn't fit what we were seeing and hearing. We could have done a lot more costly research to test each of the models, but we ended up making an assumption. We decided that the VMC would be most useful by remaining a museum investment program to support Canadian museums and heritage organizations, so true to its birth. But we would use what we were learning from our stakeholders through the relationships that we were building with them to get the VMC right for people's day-to-day realities and the changing times. Much had changed since 2001. We continued on our journey still committed to 4 things, using the investment monies to support visitor experiences, so we are not about digitization projects, website redesigns, social media campaigns. All of those things can be a component of a project submitted for investment, but we really focus on the visitor experience side of things. Having online be central to the project is still important. It doesn't mean that it will at some day preclude an online on-site blended approach. We need to meet high standards of accessibility and produce, obviously, bilingual content and experiences because this is a national investment program. But how we would do these things going forward was up for grabs, and frankly, where we could still get creative. Our work had convinced us that the VMC was still a good promise and that we could deliver on it in new and exciting ways. After validating this approach with the senior team at the museum, who were supportive, I drafted a new mission statement and high-level program description, and we've been testing that with museum professionals at focus groups across Canada throughout the fall. So we've been to British Columbia and Alberta and New Brunswick and Ontario and Quebec to test some of these ideas. And some of the things that we're looking at are a third stream of investment. The 10K and the 250K are wildly disparate. There seems to be a middle piece that's missing. A focus on innovation is something that we're testing as well, encouraging museums to achieve something new for themselves or for the wider field, which was not part of the language necessarily before. A 2-step application process is something people are interested in, with an elevator pitch that you'd then develop into a fuller proposal. Support beyond money, what does that look like? Internal and external experts to give feedback, access to resources for things like web development, accessibility, translation, etc., and making all content in the products freely shareable and reusable is something that we're thinking about or looking at quite actively. And then, of course, sharing results. If you learn things through these products and this experience with the investment program, does it just stay with you and remain a closed thing, or do you share it through publications and presentations? So in terms of content, we'll be looking at Canadian museums to provide great stories from across Canada on a variety of subjects from the past and the present, experiences and products that showcase sites and collections, and that leverage the power of digital technologies. To conclude, up to this point, reimagining the VMC has been a very people-centered journey of gathering information, testing assumptions, listening, and responding. It's taken us in some unexpected directions, but it always comes back to one simple credo, which is to put the user experience before the technology. And I am convinced that by taking the time to do the work that we've done, to explore what this means going forward, the program that emerges will be built around strong relationships and will produce great digital experiences. Thanks.
Sorry, we just have an equipment swap.
Where's your input? Do you know?
It's at the back. How do I do the,
Oh, what do you need?
no, how do I get it off speaker notes for that?
Off speak. Oh,
Oh, for,
you need your speaker. Oh, this is what I had to do. All right.
Okay.
You have to drag this window over to the right. So just drag it from the top.
oh, like that?
Yeah, see your,
Okay, okay.
look to your left though, Carol. You gotta move it up.
Move it, which one? That one? Sorry.
Sorry, I'll do it. It's lefty computer, so.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
Oh, all right. This is
Okay.
right.
Super. Great.
Sorry. Oh, you're not set up for.
Okay, I'm just going to start, and
thanks.
I'm not going to have any notes, and I'm just going to wing it. So that's okay. Thanks very much, and thanks very much to my Canadian colleagues, and to the shout out to the consultancy business I no longer have. So that's great. But actually, it's quite interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking about how much of that I actually took into my current job, and the good and bad of that, which I might get to during the presentation. So I'm going to just talk for the next 10 minutes or so about my first year at the Gardner Museum in Boston. Just tell you a little bit about the museum. Apologies for people who were in a presentation a couple of days ago, a slight repeat of that. But and then I want to talk about what we're really focusing on now as we start to kickstart our digital program. So the Isabella Gardner Stewart Gardner Museum is a fairly unique place, founded by Mrs. Gardner and a Boston philanthropist at the turn of the early 20th century. And really, the museum is modelled of idea in our head. Really, this is the palace that she lived in and was the original museum. And then in 2012, the Renzo Piano edition was opened, and really changed, had a huge impact on the museum and the visitor experience, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So as a result of having the new building, it enabled us to have a space for temporary exhibitions, which included contemporary programs, also historic exhibitions. and also a performance space. So we have a very vibrant music series of both classical music and contemporary music. And then the palace itself, this amazing kind of wow moment as you walk into the courtyard. But you can see a complete disconnect between the modern building and the entrance that the visitors go to before they actually get to the historic building. We have gardens and a horticultural team, and then a series of installations, art installations, and rooms which are left as they are. We are not allowed to change anything. And so you have this incredible experience as you're walking through the historic building of rooms that were left as they were in Mrs. Gardner's image and creation. A mixture of art, furniture, textiles, archive material, and no labels, you'll see, and not what we would call a conventional way of displaying art. And room after room, and each room different in its scope and its scale and the way that it's presented. And you'll see that we have bookcases, and she was started out as a rare book collector. So all over the palace there are these incredible collections of books, which no one can really see and certainly can't read or look at or touch. And then we have the theft from 1990, which again is all part of the mythology of the museum and built into the fabric of the history of the museum, and the empty frames where the paintings hopefully will one day return. So an incredible space, but a very, very complex offer. We're an art museum, we're a historic building, we're a modern building, we have a fine art collection, rare books, furniture, textiles, archival materials. It's a contemporary program, a performance space, and a horticultural and landscape design. So, not easy to capture, really, and to describe, and an eccentricity around the way that things are presented as well. And so for our visitors, their experience is not a traditional art museum. It's an incredibly immersive experience. There's no linear narrative. You don't move from one room to the next where it kind of makes sense in our heads. You have to make sense of this yourself, and that's really difficult when you have no labels or wall text. You're really invited to make your own connections and your own personal meaning. And I think my colleague said it in a presentation earlier. Visitors generally either love this or they hate it. But I think for me, the challenge was really to think, well, what can digital do to help to transform this visitor experience? And for me, it was around, I think, 4 kind of key areas. I think digital can help through storytelling. The collection lends itself. People want to know, about Mrs. Gardner. They want to know about the palace. They want to know about how she acquired that collection. And we have material to help to support those stories in all sorts of ways, both through the collection, but also through archival material, much of which is from her own personal archive. So there's amazing opportunities to bring things together through different means. I think we want to use digital to help people to know more about what they're looking at and what they're experiencing, and to think about how to do that at many different levels and through many different layers. We want to help people to make those personal and social connections. It's a very social museum, partly because many people don't know what's going on, so they ask, and they talk about it, and it generates conversation and discussion. And we want to be able to support that both on-site, but also for people perhaps who are visiting and telling other people about the museum, and obviously virtually as well. And we want to be able to open up the collections, much of which are currently not on view. May not be on view for a long time. Things in drawers, literally, that we can't open and display. So just fantastic opportunities for digital to transform the visitor experience and to provide scaffolding and support in ways that we're currently not doing. And here was my starting point. I mean, here's really where we are right now and what I walked into from a digital perspective. I'm the first director of digital in the museum. Up until a couple of years ago, there was really nothing, and then there was a digital task force was created, and the realization that really they needed to start to be in this space. So what we have is a lot of siloed and disconnected systems that don't talk to each other, that are managed in all different parts of the organization, and have in many ways been supported by the efforts of heroic staff and their ability to keep it going. We have an outdated website, and we have really no on-site digital at all. And we won't ever really have a big digital presence. I mean, you can see from the photographs, we're not going to be putting, massive interactive walls in the spaces, or have interactive kiosks or whatever. It's not that kind of space. So we have to think creatively about how we're going to fill that void. We have a growing social media presence, and now we've become more strategic about social media and are starting to think about how to use that in ways to not only reach our audiences, but also to share our content in ways that people want to engage with. As I said, we have incredibly enthusiastic staff who have really kept things going and are desperate to do more. We have a cautious management team, and I'm saying that in a nice way. This is new, and this comes back to sort of my coming in and wanting to power through. This is all new. This is a brave new world for the museum, and I think an approach of, I need loads of resources, I need loads of people, I need loads of everything, actually was not a helpful way for me to go. This is I think, demonstrate by success approach, and to try to not only bring the staff along with me, but really to bring the management team along with me. But there is huge potential, and that's really why I came here. It's an interesting challenge. And so my approach, or our approach, I should say, is that we really wanted to better understand the customer journey for our different audiences and platforms. So to really help us to better understand and make sense of that very complex landscape that I talked about earlier. We need to prioritize projects. We need everything. It's a shopping list. And there just isn't the bandwidth and the capacity and the budget for us to do that. So really having to think about what projects do we need to focus on and where are we going to have the most impact. We want to start to prototype and experiment. It's a brave new world. We haven't tried a lot of these things before, so let's do it incrementally. Let's learn as we go along, rather than actually trying to invest time and effort in things that might not work. We really want to measure impact and look at how we can then disseminate that information back out into the museum so that it helps us to make better things. Really want to build staff confidence. So as I said, loads of enthusiasm, but actually people don't feel necessarily very confident or sometimes empowered to do things. We want to think about how we can manage that. And we want to do all of this in a sustainable, affordable, and scalable way. So that's really my framework and my starting point. And our priorities, as I said, it's a shopping list, website, on-site, collections management, digital asset management, CRM, IT infrastructure, and the 157,000 projects that sit behind those boxes. So, this is not a short-term endeavor. But we are focusing. We are, as I said, we're trying to focus and look at our priorities. So we have two real projects for this year that are really taking up our time. One is we're about to start on a new website, and the second is that we want to pilot on-site digital experiences in a very contained and cost-effective way. And I want to use these projects really to catalyse change across the museum, demonstrate success, show what's possible, and hopefully be able to then build on that. And so we want to take a user-centric approach around this. We want to build a program. As I said, we want to test and feedback and iterate. We want to work at a pace we can handle. I want to introduce new processes and new ways of working through these projects and manage the institutional expectations. We're going to have a new website next year. we're not going to have a new ticketing system. So you're going to have a lovely user experience until you actually go and buy a ticket, and then you'll want to throw your phone across the room. So I can't do all this at once. So managing the expectations around that is a big part of this program. So we've started with a website. So this is our current website, our old website, trying to be more user-centric. We did a visitor survey, a one-question survey online to get some response about how people were using it. We work with Laura Mann at Frankly Green and Webb. Highly recommend her. And on a 2-day exercise, cross-departmental exercise, really looking at gaining an understanding of the visitor journey and what we could do around challenges, pain points, and opportunities. We did some on-site audience work around the website, asking people how they used it to get to the museum today. I got loads of good feedback around that, and a whole various other things through a discovery phase of the project. On-site, we got rid of our no photography policy at the beginning of the year when the new director came in. As I said in another session, we are the most Instagrammable museum in the world. To not be able to take photographs was sacrilegious. So being able to do that now has been incredible. And in fact, we had an Instagrammers meetup very, very soon after that, which was just fantastic for the museum. And I can't remember how many thousand more followers we got as a result of that. But it really kick-started and energized the museum around doing something that we had never been able to do before. And we are starting a digital on-site interpretation project, getting rid of these horrible laminated sheets that sort of help people to, or give people some information about what they're looking at, but not really, and they give you germs, and thinking about the audio experience and how they all fit together. So, in conclusion, because it is 3:15 up to... You're so welcome. The challenges and opportunities. I'm a startup operation in my museum, and that brings all sorts of particular challenges with it around, what kind of resources, what kind of budgets, what should we be focusing on, how do I fit into an existing structure where digital was never really part of that. Helping people to see digital as an integral to the whole visitor experience. Digital doesn't sit over here, it sits right in the center of everything that we do. So when we do the journey mapping and we talk about, the visitor experience, digital is a part of that. Managing the pace of change and expectations, and the huge opportunity to make an impact quickly and for the long term. Opportunity to influence in every area of the organization, even when they don't want it. It's happening, they can't stop it. And increased staff engagement through new ways of working. And really using digital as a catalyst for change for the museum, which I think brings us very nicely back to Eric Espig's, one of Eric Espig's original slides. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.